I was not there at the very beginning when they formed the publication. There were two merchants, one who was a manager of a bank, which, you know, some people who are around remember this is a bank called Rainier Bank, which was down here in the International District. So the branch manager of that bank, and then the owner of a business called Office Emporium, which has since relocated and is in another space outside of the International District. Those two guys got together and created the newspaper. They said it would be great to have some vehicle to promote the community. So they ran it. They hired somebody who I believe was a former Boeing employee, and he ran the paper. It was a monthly publication, 4-page tabloid. For about a year, it operated under the auspices of this business, loose business kind of arrangement. And that group, those two individuals, sold the newspaper to the Alaska Cannery Workers Association after about a year. There's an individual named Nemesio Domingo, older brother of Selme Domingo, who had a discussion at a party, and they were tired of running the newspaper and said, do you want to buy it? How about if we sell it to you for $1? So it was sold to the Alaska Cannery Workers for $1. And at that point, Nemesio then decided he had a newspaper, but he had no idea how to put together a newspaper. So the call had gone out to some of us who were communication students at the University of Washington. And so that's when I got involved, was probably in its second year of operation. I was involved again, as there weren't a whole lot of us at the time, Asian American journalists. And so I was asked whether I'd be interested in doing stories for the publication, and I agreed to do some stories, and that's how I started there. But because of my interest in documentation and history, as with the UW Daily, produced a large volume of stories, and then pretty soon the person who was editor at the time, Mayumi Sudakawa, was hired at the Seattle Times. So she had an opportunity to move into the mainstream. Mayumi's dad is George Sudakawa, the famous sculptor, painter. And so when Mayumi left, I think it was in 1976 or 77, I, by default, became the editor of the paper, and then continued on and off at the paper until 1988, when I decided to pursue some other career options. But I was always involved in the paper up through 1988, but I needed to also make some money, and so hence I did some other things, worked at the public library, I worked for the school district, I did some other work in the community, odd jobs and so forth to support myself. So that's kind of was my intersection with the newspaper.
And maybe say a few words about the role of the International Examiner in community politics.
Well, the International Examiner, because there were really no organs to provide information to people, played a very important role in getting people all on the same page. So low-income housing need. Okay, we do a story on it, and then it identifies it, and then the folks within the city and the bureaucracy then realize there's a need, and then you've got a way to showcase the issue. Or there's going to be a demonstration at, Union Station to protest against the intermodal transportation terminal that they're planning and the potential impact on the neighborhood. So we do a story on that, or we say there's going to be a demonstration, and then it kind of creates some movement where people come together. Now, at the time, there was not the kind of awareness that there is now, or even the Asian American reporters at the papers, the mainstream papers, to kind of cover these things. So it was a much more important organ back then than it is today. Not to say it doesn't still have a role today. The paper really served as the information network element that knitted the community together. And we tried to be broad enough, but then also to advocate, to not simply stand by the sideline and let things happen. We identified issues and then did editorials and took stands, and then we also had our straight news stories, which were just interviewing folks. But they played an important role, too, I think, in nurturing a first generation of Asian American community journalists. And I feel proud about that aspect, which is, and a lot of them don't continue as journalists today, but then they learned writing, editing skills, had a chance to interact with the community. And then there's some value because you've developed a broader sense of support for the community that people carry on wherever they go.